car I pull up in. But if you don't see the car I pull up in, you have no idea who I am. But you could still have a nice car and be broke too as well. And I'll walk into places, and every so often I feel it. I feel how they're treating me differently and looking at me differently, and I know it's because of the color of my skin. And I go back in my mind, I'm like, oh man. Like I knew if I walked in here with some proper khakis and a white button down and maybe like a proper watch on, like, you know, maybe they wouldn't be looking at me like this. I have to break that. I had taken this course in California where they taught you how to like look at things in the world differently and how you solve problems differently and how you listen differently. Less than 1% of the population will look for a solution to a problem, and when they find that there is no valid solution to that problem, will go ahead and create the solution. Less than 1%. And most people, we hear complaints all day long, and we just kind of couple to those complaints. We don't solve the complaint, right? Before you jump in and say, yeah, you know what happened to me was, oh, you know, this one time I had the same thing. So you tell me something and I'm like, huh, so you said this, what about this? And ask a follow-up question. And then...
Welcome to another episode of the A1 Experience. I've got somebody I just met, Mr. Suresh Madhavan. If you guys don't know Suresh, he has one hell of a story, rising above a lot of adversity and becoming a multimillionaire. I want him to share his story in detail, but Suresh, welcome.
Thanks for having me, man. This is great.
I'm honored to have you, man. So please, for those that haven't heard your story, please share.
I guess at the beginning. So my mom came here from India, and she was young and she came here. She studied nursing in England. And then she had an arranged marriage, came here to New York, and had me. But a few months prior to me being born, my father left. And so I was born to my mom, single mom, now living here in this country, you know, barely able to speak the language, you know, making $6 an hour as that's a good catch, as a nurse, you know, making like nothing. And so it was just, started out. That was it. That was the start. So from an early age, home alone, trying to, make my own food, do my own homework.
With siblings?
So I have a sibling that's 4 years older. Then I had a sibling that was like 15 years older.
Okay.
And but the one that was much older left when she turned 18 because her life was raising two little kids. So she literally just deserted us, And so then it was me and my sister who was 4 years older than me, and we were pretty much just on our own. And my mom was working multiple jobs, kind of illegally, like to work for different nursing agencies and not tell the others, because you can only work certain hours. So, but then we were living in a place called Staten Island, New York. And Staten Island, New York is, if you don't know what Staten Island, New York is, just think of the Sopranos TV show. It was...
I remember from the first Grand Theft Auto game.
Yeah. It's like real, like it was like at that time too, it was like 100% Italian.
Yeah.
And then, our family, with my mom who was never home. And so we were in a neighborhood that was actually built by a mobster, a famous mobster. And, she bought the house and built the house because she wanted to have good schools for her children, because for Indian parents, education is number one. Mm-hmm. And if you don't become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, you're pretty much garbage. That's like the mentality, So that's what she wanted for us. But we were in this neighborhood and they just did not want us living in this neighborhood, So they were doing everything, every single day and my sister and my mom are like much lighter than me. They're kind of like your complexion.
Really?
Yeah, much lighter than me. And then there was me.
Same dad.
Yeah. Wow. So allegedly. So, it was hard for me. And then, so there was, doing different things, harassing us, harassing my mom. Thankfully, most of the parents of the kids that I was friends with, they were good to me, which was a good thing because they saw me as a child and, they were fine. But then there was these other people in the neighborhood that just, they didn't care, And it got progressively worse. And then it culminated where one night when my mom was at work, my sister and I were actually sleeping in the living room on like, two sofas that were like on an L 90-degree angle, and they threw a brick through the window followed by a quarter stick of dynamite, and it blew up on the arm of the sofa near where our heads were, and so that was like the final straw. And there was a lot of stuff that happened where the police never came because because of who was running the neighborhood, the police just don't come when, someone like does vandalize your stuff. So at that point, my mom realized that was, she had put up a good fight, but at that point she's like, I'm not going to lose my kids. So we moved to a little town in the central part of New Jersey. And once again, she wanted a place where there was good schools and, where we get a good education. But she was never really focused on the demographic of the town. So once
Education or bust.
That was it. So it was like, once again, it was a town. It was like all like 99.999% white, and then there was me.
Kudos to her though for like making that happen. I mean, she's probably working a lot of jobs, like you said.
Yeah.
Just really just putting it all on the line. So I really commend her for that.
Yeah, because she came from the school that education is key, and education is something that no one can take away from you. So let everything else around you harden you. As long as you have your education, no one can take that away. So she didn't want to move us to a neighborhood that was maybe a little bit more diverse with maybe some more people who look like me. But because of lack of funding and all kinds of other stuff, issues with police, whatever, crime, I was not going to get a good education. And I maybe was going to get caught up in like gangs or crime or something like that. So she said, you know what? You're going to deal with living in this neighborhood, in this town where there's no one who looks like you. And you're going to deal with some hardships maybe on a certain level, but at least you're going to get a good education.
Yeah.
And you'll get out of here. So she wasn't really around a lot for me to voice my complaints to her about what I was dealing with, like going to school. When you're a little kid, you're like second, third grade, and there's like a birthday party, and like the parents and the teachers are bringing in cupcakes for someone's birthday party, and it just so happened they just don't have a cupcake for me.
Did they actually have it, or they're just there?
No, they just didn't give it to me. Yeah, so like it's like a little kid's birthday party in the class celebrating, and all the kids around you have a cupcake, and there's no cupcake for me, So like little things like birthday parties where everyone was invited except me, So those little things were happening, and my mom was just busy working in New York. We were home alone. And there was not even someone to bounce it off of. And like when I did see her and I would share a couple of things with her, she would just say, and we were little, and in that time, like that's what matters. Like, that's the age where what you get for Christmas matters, and what like what's happening in school matters, because that's like the whole world to you. And she's like, none of that matters. Listen, just get your education. You're going to be a doctor, and you're not even going to see these people ever again. And you're in third grade. You're like, what? What are you talking about? Yeah.
Everything's magnified.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but that was that.
Speaking of which, like I remember like every like bullying incident, every time somebody like did you wrong back in the day, like you kind of remember those things. They kind of don't go away.
Yeah. They stuck with me. I mean, I still remember to this day. So, dealt with that, dealt with a lot of stuff from the police officers in that town, which were not kind to me at all. And, in that time, I realized I had to be different. I had to dress differently. I had to act differently. I had to hold myself differently. I had to speak differently. I had to like do everything different, because I realized I was in a situation, literally being the only child in town and in the entire school system that looked like me, and all the people in this town that had this mindset and this mentality. I realized I could not be what they were expecting me to be. So I would have and of course, when you're in a town like that, all your friends are white, because that's, whatever. And your kids on the football team you play basketball with, whatever. But they could like go around in like gym shorts and hoodies and sneakers. I couldn't wear that stuff out because I would be looked at differently. So I was always in khakis and a polo shirt, buttoned up, like whatever, like what you're wearing, And everyone was like, why are you always like dressed up? I had to be. It wasn't my choice. I wanted to look like what they were wearing, but I had to present myself like always as like top 1%. And that actually helped me later on in life, because it built a foundation for how to conduct myself. And it helped me, I can't imagine all the different areas where being super squared away, having your, for lack of a better word, having your, ish together, and, saying, okay, this is how I'm going to present myself to the world. And the world is going to respond by saying, hey, this guy has his act together, I had teachers outright tell me that I was not going to be smart enough to get into college. Kids like me didn't go to college. Yeah, like all kinds of awful things,
Right.
And I just, I had teachers like literally try to hold me back by like, making up stories about me, saying I said things and did things and trying to put me in suspension, detention, things like that. And what was good was there was a lot of students I was in school with that saw this, that it didn't sit well with them.
Mm.
But it was also kind of hard for them as students to speak up against administration and teachers and things like that,
You
So
still talk to some of these people to this day?
a couple of them, yeah,
Wow.
a couple of them, yeah, a couple of them. Um, and in this town where I was growing up, a few houses down from me, there was a kid who actually ended up being the same age as me. Our birthdays are just a few days apart, and he actually became my best friend. He's still my best friend to this day. And his parents kind of saw what was happening at my home, with my mom never being there and my sister and I being kind of, raising ourselves. So his parents kind of took me in and took me under their wing. And that really helped transform my life, because at least it was a male figure. He was a good dude, Navy veteran, and he was a hardworking blue collar guy. So taught me about wiring, electric and plumbing and stuff like that, because that's what he did. So I learned a lot from him, and he kind of brought me in as a son, and his mom kind of brought me in, and treated me like her son, and it was actually a godsend to. And they introduced me to religion, and started taking me to church, because I was lost. I was just on this, I was this little kid, hanging around. So that was something that was really powerful and very fortunate for me.
Yeah.
And that helped to have that little bit of that system that, when I was dealing with some of this stuff later on in school and with the police and stuff, it was nice to have, that kind of support system. But yeah, I couldn't wait to get out of that town.
Right.
For sure.
Insurance agents. What is every agency's highest closing lead source without fail? Personal referrals. What if I told you I could help you turbocharge the frequency in which you got personal referrals? In the last 5 years, I've written over 5,000 items and $3.5 million in premium from inbound organic sources, and it cost me nothing. How? Because posting on social media is free. If you want to turn your agency into a referral machine, then go to nicksaka.com/creators and sign up for the Insurance Creators Mastermind, where me and my team will meet with you and your team twice a month to help you with something that no other agency is doing. Imagine having the guidance, the ideas, the trends, and the strategies that actually work in converting more business for your agency. Go to nicksaka.com/creators for more. Now, back to the show. I took note that you wanted to become a Navy SEAL.
So what happened was, I'd grown up, and at some point I'd been given this book by someone's dad, right? And it was this book called Rogue Warrior, and it was by this guy who was essentially the father of SEAL Team 6. And this dad saw me as this fatherless kid who was kind of milling around, and he was like, this is a good book for you to read. So I got the book. It was a paperback book. And I think the guy who wrote it was Richard Marcinko or something. And I read that book like 4 times. I was like, oh man, this is like what I want to do. But I couldn't do that because I had to become a doctor. And my mom was like, either become a doctor or you're like dead to me. So I got into a medical program. I was going to school in New York City, and 9/11 happened when I was in school in the city. So right after 9/11, I was like, man, that's it, man. I'm foregoing medicine. I'm going to join the military. But it was weird. It was a weird time because it's kind of like a weird dynamic to go back. Like I was in this situation in that town I was living in where I kind of felt in a lot of ways a little bit like a pariah. But then I made my way in school, and, obviously I had good friends. I actually, in an all-white town, all-white school, ended up becoming senior class president. So I did the things that needed to be done to present myself in a way that, you build a trust, right, and show leadership. And it was like toward the end of high school, senior year, it was weird to be in this situation where I always felt like I was less than. And then I was out one day with a buddy of mine, and this woman recruited me to this modeling agency for modeling. And I almost thought it was like a scam, right? When you talk about modeling, and I was like, that's what girls do. And she's like, no, I'm legit model agent, and I think you have a great look, and I'd like to put you in to do some castings and whatever. So fast forward for the next 3 years, I was doing runway shows. I was doing print modeling. I got a couple of ad campaigns that were on billboards in New York City and Paris and Milan. It was the craziest thing. So imagine going through school as like the black kid that is kind of behind the eight ball and you always feel a certain way. And then literally overnight, someone's putting you on a billboard in like, it was the craziest thing because you always felt like you weren't good enough, right? And then overnight, someone's like, "Hey, you're perfect," and boom, and you're doing all this stuff, and it was so wild. So in the midst of that, I was going to school, New York City, traveling, doing that, and it was weird to like be in New York City and walk past as I'm walking to class, to my organic chemistry lab. You're walking past a billboard of your face, 100, and it was surreal, but that was not my world. That was just something I did on the side, and I just kept walking, I would take the subway home sometimes from class, and I remember one time there was a group of little girls, and they had their Abercrombie and Fitch shopping bags, and I was on one of the shopping bags. But I was just like, I had a test I had to study for, so it was like this surreal thing I was in that was bizarre. 9/11 happens, and I'm like, that's it. This is crazy. I'm gonna throw all this away. I'm gonna stop the modeling. I'm gonna stop medical school. I'm gonna go become a Navy SEAL and fight. A friend of mine that I went to high school with, his name was Justin. He'd gone to the Naval Academy and then had become a SEAL. And I'd heard about that. And I played sports with him coming up, and he was a great, great dude, great athlete. And I said, man, that's what I'm going to do that, And I remember I spoke to the recruiter, and I came home. I told my mom, I'm like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. She was like, yeah, no.
How old are you at this point?
21, I think 21. Maybe 21, 22 or something like that. And she's like, no, you're not. I'll kill you. You're not going to go overseas for someone else to kill you. I'll kill you. She's like, you're my only son and you're my baby boy. She's like, I'll kill you. And so she was like, you absolutely will not. So I finished school. I didn't finish the medical program. I finished university, and I got multiple degrees. And I went into research for a little while, and then I was just kind of like milling around because I was pissed off that I couldn't join the military. And I was really trying to scheme how I could join the military somehow, just to do it. And my best friend, the one who had lived a few houses down from me, a couple of years prior, he had become a police officer. Okay. And we were just hanging out one day, and he's like, "Why don't you ever thought about becoming a police officer? You get to serve, your community, whatever." And then at that time, everyone loved the police, right? It was post 9/11. Everywhere you went, everyone was loving the cops, loving the firefighters. So that's what I did. So I pursued a career in law enforcement, and I found a municipality in New Jersey that was really, by all accounts, from talking to a lot of people, the #1 police agency to work for in the state of New Jersey. So I drove down there, and I said, that's where I'm going to apply. I just didn't know that they were the #1 police agency for a lot of reasons, but also this was 2002, I think, and they had never hired a minority officer in the history of the department. Wow. I didn't know that. I went down there. I went in. I walked in the door to apply for an application and get an application. Like the record stopped.
How did you find that out?
So I just started talking to police officers I knew.
Okay.
And I started talking to state troopers, and a lot of guys were like, "Oh, you should just join the state police. It's diverse. There's a lot of room for growth, things like that." But then there are some downsides to being part of such a big organization. So I wanted an organization that was solid and squared away, but also, localized, where I wouldn't be bounced around the state and things like that. I thought was the better idea. It was not the better idea in the long run. But then I started talking to a few different officers, and they were like, "Oh, that one agency down there at the Jersey Shore, they're locked in, they're squared away, they got great training, great equipment, they're one of the top paid, if not top paid in the state. That's kind of an agency a guy like you, belongs at." So I went down there, and that's why I applied. And yeah, that was the beginning of my law enforcement journey. Yeah.
So you become the first minority to work for them, and how long are you working with them?
I did a total of 13 years. I got hired in 2003, separated in 2016 after they wrongfully terminated me. But because from the day I walked in, they were looking to terminate me. So talk about
Real quick, you said I read that you came out number 1 on the police test. What's that test entail?
So I found out what the test was because I figured, okay, now at this point I've learned that they're number 1 agency, their top department. They have the hardest physical in the state. They have multiple phases of their physical where there's a physical assessment that you would think of like running, push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, standing long jump, carrying a dummy, which was crazier than any test in the state of New Jersey at the time. There's a mandated test in the state of New Jersey that is called, I believe, the Chief's test or something like that, and it's just like a blanket, like a boilerplate test. You know, you got to do this many push-ups, this many sit-ups, this many, run, whatever. This agency took that test and like on steroids and made it like this crazy thing and added their own stuff to it. So it was hard. It was a hard test. I found out what you had to do on the test, and I just started training. Tried to replicate any of the workouts I could, and I was trained like an animal. Of course, the part of the test that talked, your mental aptitude, wasn't worried about. Here I was, doing biochemistry and finite math and physics. So whatever the written test was for becoming a police officer, I really wasn't too worried about. I was more worried about the physical aspect. So of course I did well on the written parts, but the physical one, I knew that day I showed up, there were 480 guys standing on line at the local high school. And I was literally the only guy with dark skin. Everyone else was like all-American white guys, blonde hair, blue-eyed, Abercrombie and Fitch looking dudes. And there was me. And I'm looking around, I'm like, am I in the right line? And that was this town. Everyone knew that was this town. The town had like a history of racism. KKK was based there for a while. Yeah, it was crazy. And I was like, I don't care, And they had never hired an Asian, never hired a Hispanic.
Wow.
Nothing ever in the history. And this is 2002. This is great. And this is not like 82, So I'm online with almost 500 guys. I'm the only one that looks like me. And they had announced that they're going to only hire 2 guys out of, I think it was like 480 took the test.
Okay.
And they were looking to hire 1, maybe 2. So I'm like, oh man, this is going to be tough. So I was like, I got to come out on top. I got to come out on top.
Like a large margin.
Yeah.
I'm already dark skinned.
Right, right. So I'm like, maybe I was like, I don't know how this is going to go. So I did it, crushed it. Then there was a written test, and then there was something else. And then there was like a swimming test that they had where there was no water in the town, but you had to have there was a swimming test. We had to like dive in a pool, go grab some stuff from the bottom, bring it up, and then I think tread water for like 20 minutes or so. I don't know what it was. And then there was a fighting portion of the test, which, by the way, they don't have any of this stuff today.
Really?
Yeah, they've done away with all of it for whatever crazy reasons. But then there was a fighting test where you're on wrestling mats and you have a gun belt on with a gun, fake gun, and I have to fight and get that gun away from you. And I think it was 2 minutes, and then we switch. I put the gun belt on with the gun, and then you have to fight me for 2. And it was like no holds barred. I mean, you couldn't punch in the face or squeeze testicles or anything or poke in the eyes, but it was a fight. You're fighting another dude, and it's the longest 2 minutes of your life. So I passed that with flying colors. And then there was a psych evaluation where you literally sat in a room with this dude who looked like Sigmund Freud. And he was asking you the most bizarre questions in the world. You go into that room thinking, I got this, I'm not crazy. And then you leave wondering if you're crazy. And because he's asking you questions like, so how many times were we on the cover of People magazine last year? And you're like, what? He's like, you heard the question. And I'm like, 0, I'm pretty sure. Wait. What? You're like, it was so crazy. Wild question. How many times did you go into outer space last year? I'm like, never. And he just kind of right.
In my dream.
Like, wait, hold on. So so I passed that and ended up, I guess I wasn't crazy. And
so out of these 480 candidates, essentially, you're one of the 2 that get accepted.
I got one of the 2 that got accepted.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So and then you got to go to the police academy. Yeah, you go to the police academy.
So then, fast forward, you were saying you get terminated. You're there for 10, 13 years?
13 years. So year 10 is when I came up with the idea for 221B Tactical, the maxx-dri vest. It goes under your body armor, keeps you cooler and drier while you're wearing body armor. I was suffering for 10 years wearing body armor, and there was no solution to it. So I decided to put my education to use, and I designed a product. I invented a material and designed a product.
What was the problem with the previous one?
So when you wear a body armor vest, in our agency, we wore it under our uniform shirt. A lot of agencies now, like I think Metro here, they wear their body armor vest on the outside of their uniform, which it's still hot because it's thick, it's heavy, and there's no breathability. So especially in heat like this where it's 110 degrees, you're just melting. And imagine you have a nice breathable, polo shirt on. But now imagine I put a vest on you that's about 3/4 of an inch thick that doesn't breathe, the solid, slightly pliable material, and I strapped that to you with Velcro and I said, okay, now go hang out outside. You'd be like ready to like jump off a building, right? So that was us. And even in the wintertime, you still were sweating because you had this thing really creating this, this cover on your body. And so for 10 years I suffered, and I was breaking out in rashes and, all kinds of stuff. And your vest smells, you have this odor that you're always dealing with, and you're trying to use Febreze and Lysol and powders and all that. None of it works. And I just looked around the world, and all the cops I talked to around the country, nah, that's it, man. You got to deal with it. It's wearing body armor. I just refused. I was like, no way. So I had taken this course in California where they taught you how to like look at things in the world differently, and how you solve problems differently, and how you listen differently. And most people, we hear complaints all day long, and we just kind of couple to those complaints. We don't solve the complaint.
Yeah.
Right? We just like, you're complaining about something. We're at lunch and you're complaining about something. And my response, because as a human, I want to couple to you. I'm like, yeah, bro, the same thing happened to me. And you're like, yeah, okay, we got this thing. Most people are not listening in a conversation. They're just waiting for their turn to talk. And that one thing that I learned from my mentor is what helped me make my first million. When people are talking in a conversation, don't wait for your chance to talk. And one of the things he taught me was like, listen, and then make it a point to ask them a question about something they just said. Before you jump in and say, yeah, what happened to me was, this one time I had the same thing. So you tell me something, and I'm like, so you said this, what about this? And ask a follow-up question. And then get into what you want to share maybe. And I started doing that. And I started just listening. I'm like, yeah, I'm suffering from this. And everyone around me, I work with 100 different guys at this police department. They're all suffering. I travel around the country in different states, and everyone is just complaining about the same thing, and there's no solution for it. I'm going to come up with a solution for it. So I did, and it went viral, and that was it. That was year 10. Prior to that, I think in like year 3 or 4, I had just through a girl I was dating, her family was friends with someone who owned an insurance agency. And the friend of the mom of the girl I was dating just saw how I was, and she said, you really like are a pretty sharp guy. You're you're so dialed in on everything that you do. And of course, you're very articulate and all this stuff. She's like, have you ever thought about getting into any kind of sales business? I'm like, no. Sales? Like what? Like selling like refrigerators or vacuums door to door? And she's like, no, something else. I said, what? She said, I want to introduce you to this guy.
This is after the police.
No, this is my 3rd year as a police officer.
Okay,
yeah.
Got it.
Because the vest thing didn't come till year 10.
Got it.
So I'm like a 3rd year cop, maybe, 3rd or 4th year cop. And she's having this conversation with me. So I said, yeah, I'll meet the guy. So I go to this beautiful office, kind of like the one I came to today. And he is a life and health insurance agent. And he had his own agency. One of the nicest guys, I learned a ton from him. And he said, you're interested in learning the business? I'll send you for training, learn. And I realized it wouldn't be bad to learn about money, because my mom never taught us about money, like most parents didn't talk to you. And my mom struggled, financially her whole life. So I figured this would be a good twofold thing. I could make some money on the side, and also teach myself about, money. So I got my life and health insurance license, and it kind of was financial planning and then on the back end you took care of the insurance planning,
Right.
and it was like incredible, and I started to do pretty well, and that was the first thing that my police department didn't like.
That you a conflict of interest?
No, they just didn't like that I was doing something on the side that was successful. They just didn't like it. They didn't like me because of the color of my skin, but that was like one thing that they were, they didn't like.
It's also like kind of like the crab in the bucket. Like you're starting to do well in something else too, and it's just like, no, stay in this bucket. And focus on your line of duty.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's gonna. But of course, with my duty, I had to excel past everyone else. I couldn't come in as a police officer in that department and be mediocre. That was not going to be acceptable because I already knew I was behind the 8 ball. Imagine coming into this office day one. You don't look like anyone here, and literally day one, when you walk in, the lady at the front greets you and says, "Listen, by the way, they don't want you here. Nobody wants you here. We had to hire you."
It sounds like something that you'd watch in a movie and be like, that shit didn't happen.
Right?
It's like, there's no way.
It's almost unbelievable, right? So imagine how that would feel, being like getting that sentiment the second you walked in here day one, because you look different, and someone there are people just openly saying, "Listen, the only reason you got hired is because you did really well on the test. They couldn't not hire you, or else you could have sued, right? Because you did so well. But no one wants you here." Imagine how you're like, and then you're like, "Wait, I got to be here for 25 years." Imagine day one, that's what you hear of a job. Not like you got a job at some place that you could just get another job at a different. Like, no, you left your career of being a physician behind. You left. You decided not to go the route of joining the military and having a career in the military. You put it all on the line to come here. You went through 6 months of a grueling police academy where I came out number 1 on physical fitness in the police academy. I got the award for physical fitness and PT, and so I had to be above and beyond everything. And then you walk in the door, they're like, "Listen, by the way, they're just going to try to fire you every single day you walk in the door here. Just so you know. Anyway, good luck." I mean, sometimes when I talk to people and they tell me they're having a tough day, or they're having a hard time sticking to their commitments, or they're having a hard time following the line to get to their goals, I'm like, what? I walked into a job every day for 13 years where they were literally trying to fire me, and you're sitting here complaining that your internet's slow and you're like some bullshit.
Right.
It didn't make sense. So, I started doing well in the life and health world, and I started to learn a lot about money, and I started learning about investing. And I started doing better and better. And like you said, they saw that. And I don't think they liked it because it was just something, hey, this guy's, rising up. I was able to buy a house. I bought myself a nicer car, things like that. Right. And then year 10 hit. And in year 10 is when I came up with the idea for the product. And then that company started. And that company started blowing up fast. And then we were worldwide selling the product to police and military around the world. And then year 12 is when everything started to fall apart at the police department. Yeah.
Did you how did you create that company coming from somebody aside from the life insurance, you can consider that kind of like a business?
Yeah.
What were the steps that you took to create that company? You said you designed it.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get investors? How did that all come to fruition? And then also, how was it marketed and go viral like it did?
Yeah, and so this is we're talking about I think 2012, 2013, 2014 when this was all starting. And 2013, 2014. So I started it in my garage because this is going to be my own. Like the other thing, I walked into a building and they kind of said, "Okay, go study for this test, go get your licenses, come back in, and then you'll start seeing friends and family and start trying to do planning for them and then sell them insurance." I had to learn that if I wanted to build something big, I couldn't do it on my own because I didn't have the knowledge. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of things I tried in the past that I tried to do it on my own, but I didn't have the knowledge and they failed. There were businesses I had in between the life insurance world and 221B Tactical that I failed because I didn't ask for help. But I didn't have the knowledge and the competency. Maybe I'd read a couple of books and things like that. So when it came to this, I didn't want to make that mistake again. So I made it a point where I said, I'm not going to do this business alone. I'm 1,000% bringing in a business partner. I'd been to this course that taught me how to read the world and changed my mind around business. And I remember there was a guy in that course from New York City that he was in the fabric and the textile business. So I reached out to him.
Nice.
Immediately, I reached out to him and I said, I have an idea for this product. And if we do it right and I can create it, we're going to make millions of dollars. And I was just like some guy from this course.
Did you know to have like a NDA, or were you still kind of shooting from the hip trying to figure it out?
No, I didn't have an
Most people, like, they won't even like share an idea
Yeah.
until it's like all that, but you were probably like still green, like trying to figure
Yeah.
it, like, so you just shot from the hip and tell this guy this idea.
Mm-hmm. And he said, oh, yeah, I remember you from the course. You're the police officer and the life insurance guys. Yeah. He said, okay, well, what do you got? So I went to New York City, and he's like, yeah, there's no material that will create space between your undershirt and your body armor. Really, there's nothing that exists. So, but he said, I think there's a company in South Korea that makes something with this process that they were doing before it even came here, called 3D printing. And I said, okay, I'm getting on a flight, 15 hours to South Korea. And I was able to develop a material that was kind of already being used there for something else in a different, and I had to completely change the material, but use the technology they were using and develop the material that I use for what's today the maxx-dri vest.
You did this while you were an officer still?
While I was an officer.
You, like, requested like vacation time?
Yeah, I just used my vacation time. While other guys were using it to go to like Disney and stuff, I was using it to go to South Korea.
Wow.
And then I got the material made there. They were able to make it to my spec. I brought it back here, and then I had to sew it. I didn't know how to sew. So I went and got a sewing machine from a yard sale, and I had to go on YouTube to learn how to use the damn thing. And I was able to cut it and sew it, outline my body armor vest, my bulletproof vest from my work. I was able to outline it with chalk, cut it, but then I didn't know how to do edging. So I used duct tape for edging until I could learn how to sew edges.
Yeah.
And I used it at work, went through a couple of iterations of it, had to make some changes. I went back and forth with my partner at the time, Brad. And once it was ready, it was dialed in. I mean, I was literally going to work and wearing this thing that had duct tape and like strings hanging off it under my uniform. And guys were looking at me like, what the hell is that thing? But then when they tried it, they were like, oh, that works. It works. That was the proof, right? And so that was it. And so once we knew it worked, we said, okay, let's get a few hundred pieces produced. How much was that going to cost? X dollars. I had that money, right, from the insurance world.
Right.
So we didn't go out of pocket. We didn't have to go get money from lenders. We went out of pocket. And we got them produced. And then there was this trade show in Atlantic City, New Jersey. It was a police security expo. Went down there, literally opened up the back of the trunk, pulled out the box, and cops were walking by, and they're like, what is this thing that looks like fishnet, but thick, And I said, yeah, you wear it under your body armor for ventilation and cooling. Lets the heat escape, lets the sweat escape, and lets cool air in.
So this isn't actually like stopping bullets.
You wear it
coming
under,
in. You wear it
under,
okay.
yeah. It's a layer that creates air under your vest.
Got it.
So you don't sweat to death. And or you will still sweat, but it lets the sweat evaporate, so you're not soaking in your own sweat, Okay. And as soon as cops walking around that trade show saw it, immediately they were like, I'll take one. And then we were running out.
How much were you selling them for?
Oh man, we were selling them for like nothing because we didn't know, right? So we were essentially selling them for what it cost us, but at the time there was no company, so we had no overhead, we had no costs, right? And as you know, you could get a product made for $10, and if you're literally just getting the product shipped to you and then sitting at a table at a flea market selling them, you could sell it for $12 and do okay. But the second you have building, employees, warehouses, boom, 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 you can't sell it for $12 anymore. Insurances and transfer and duty and tax. Well, now you got to start selling it for $20 to just maybe like come out okay, right? So we started selling it early on for like $40 or $50 or something. It was like crazy. And there was a woman walking around that trade show from a really popular police website called Police One. So she walked by, she saw it. She's like, what is this? So I explained it. She's like, do you mind if we do a little interview? I said, no problem. We did a little interview. That interview went live on their website. And all we had was this little crappy like Shopify store. I don't even know if it was Shopify or if it was something pre-Shopify. And it like pretty much like it like crashed our site because cops around the world were like seeing this article of this police, and the title of it was "Police Officer Invents Product to Keep You Cooler and Drier While Wearing Body Armor." And that was, we didn't know, Google SEO, that was a highly searched term because cops all around the world were entering into Google, how do I stay cooler and drier wearing body armor, which we still use that today.
Like nobody else was like, just like you said earlier, like people are always talking about the problem, but not too many of us are like intentional about, oh, that's a problem. That's a solution. There's a solution. Like, I should create the solution. Like, there's no solution for this.
Yeah.
And
clearly people were looking for a solution,
right?
There were people, Google let us know that people were looking for a solution. And then when they didn't find one, they were just like, oh, well, okay.
Right.
Guess there's nothing out there, And the 1% of people, actually it's proven less than 1%, say less than 1% of the population will look for a solution to a problem. And when they find that there is no valid solution to that problem, will go ahead and create the solution. Less than 1%. And that's why how many billionaires are there out there, right? Because it's very few. People want to go online and on their phone and find that solution and have it show up Amazon Prime next day to their doorstep. But if you go on Amazon, and I tell people this, like, you go on Amazon and you're searching for something and you can't find it, you should be on Temu or Alibaba the next day trying to find someone to create that offer. Because if you were looking for it, most likely someone else was looking for it.
So that kind of scales, and now you're how many years? What was the timing of this starting to go crazy and you leaving? Or are you saying you got terminated from?
Yeah. So year 12, we were 2 years. Year 12 of my police career, the company was like really getting big, and it was at the point where my partner was like, we need you to come on full time. So I had gone into human resources and got my paperwork to see what it would look like for me to retire early, and looked at that, talked to my accountant, put everything together, and I said that, this is it. I'm going to get ready. And so I had everything for my pension, because you still get a pension if you don't do 25 years. So I got all that together. I had all the information, and literally the next day is when I got called in. I got called in for...
I saw that you inquired about quitting. So I could do it.
Yeah. So we're going to fire you first. No, they didn't know. They didn't know, actually. And they started this grand inquisition. Long story short, it's long, convoluted. It's all out there. It's all online. It's all public record because it was a public case. What happened, and then my lawsuit was followed up, and which I won, which is also public. Long and short of it, I had a supervisor that brought his mistress to my home without my consent or my knowledge, and I came home and found them there. I interrupted them and was like, what the hell's going on here? And there was an interaction there, and ultimately I left, and then a couple hours later, he left with his girlfriend, and I had contractors at my house working on the house at the same time too, so they were all witness to this. So it was kind of crazy. He was drunk. He was drunk on drugs and all this other stuff, which I didn't know about, but he was a mess. So months after, so he was about to be terminated months later for some other stuff, but they allowed him to resign. It was the craziest thing in the world because there was some serious charges against him involving drugs, domestic abuse, and stuff like that, which is another story. But he was allowed to resign and go off into the sunset. And crazy enough, a week after he resigned, he ran his girlfriend, his mistress, his father over with his car and almost killed him, which is crazy. So he's gone, and then like a month after he's gone, they call me in and they ask me about that situation that happened at my house where I confront, because it came out in their investigation of him. And I was just like, that came out. And essentially they were asking me about what happened. And honestly, during that time, it was just before he got fired, and they were questioning me about this. I had to be perfect because if I wasn't, I knew they would try to take me out. So everything I did there was, as close as I could be to perfect. So they called me in and they'd questioned me about that incident at my house. And I didn't really feel like it was any of their business. Whatever, something silly. Nothing criminal, but whatever. Had nothing to do with work, had nothing to do with the office. A couple of months later, they don't terminate him, they let him leave, right? Because he had criminal charges and all that stuff. Like a month or so after that, he's gone. They call me in and they're like, here, we're going to be suspending you for 6 months. And I said, what? I said, now, this is the day after I went to get my paperwork together to retire, which I was planning to do in like the next 30 days. And I said, 6 months off for what? They're like, oh, remember a few months back when we called you in and we asked you about that incident with Sergeant so-and-so? I said, he doesn't even work here anymore. He's gone. They're like, yeah, but when we asked you about that incident where he brought that girl to your house, I said, yeah. They're like, well, you didn't give us the whole story. You withheld some information and you didn't give us the whole story, the whole truth when we first called you in. I said, yeah, I came in half hour later and told you everything. You shook my hand and said thank you and ultimately ended up like getting rid of that guy and whatever. I said, what do I have to do with this? They're like, well, you weren't completely honest with us at first. I said, about like a personal relationship, like off duty, like had nothing to do with police work or crime or anything. They're like, yeah, no problem. But yeah, 6 months off. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to accept that. So at that time, I knew I was leaving. So I'm like, screw it, I'm going to fight this. You guys have been trying to do this to me for 12 years. It was 12 years at this point. I said, no, I'm not going to just take 6 months off and, take that hit.
So you fight them.
I fought it. And
you eventually win.
So no, I fought it, and they brought in a mediator who was a police chief from another department, who was friends with my police chief, who was the racist who was doing all this to me. So I don't know how that was like unbiased, but so he came in, he heard my side of the story, he heard the department side of the story of like what happened during those interviews and whatever, and my chief came in at the time. He said, Suresh lied, and we can't have someone working here who can't tell the truth. And my attorney was like, you were asking him about someone's personal life that had nothing to do with police work, not happened on duty. Like, really, by law, you really didn't even have the right to ask him about that. And they're like, we're the police. We could ask him about anything. They're like, actually, no, this is the law. You can't ask someone about personal matters that don't have anything to do with a crime. And they're like, we can ask anyone anything. And if he didn't answer the questions, we can fire him. So I was in a compromised situation. If I didn't answer, they fire me. If I did answer, they still tried to fire me. So it was kind of like, a shitty situation. So it was all heard. And then at the end of the in-house like little mediation hearing, the mediator looked at everything and said, okay, this is obviously not, this guy, Suresh, has never had any kind of disciplinary action against him. Outstanding record as a police officer, loved in the community and all this stuff, doesn't warrant 6 months off. So my attorney emails me. He's like, okay, it's going to be 30 days. I say, okay. The next morning, I get an email from my attorney. He said, look at this letter. The mediator gave his recommendation to the township and the mayor and my police chief of 30 days should be my punishment, not 6 months. The next morning, he writes another letter saying, I rescind my letter saying Officer Madhavan should get 30 days off, and now I amend my decision. Officer Madhavan should be immediately terminated. So I look at this email, and I have the email, which is like, it was like shocking. I said, wait a second, this like less than 24 hours ago, he said 6 months was way too harsh. And based on my stellar record, 30 days would be okay. Now, all of a sudden, wake up in the morning, he's like, I should be fired? Where did this come from? So my attorney, of course, called him and said, sir, what's happening here? And he said, I don't need to tell you. I just changed my mind. That was it. So now we're going into, 2013, 2014, and I'm realizing that I can't just be the role that I was playing cop during the day and then in the evening kind of doing some stuff for 221B. I had to now become a CEO. And I'd never really been a proper CEO before. So I had to learn, what does a CEO do? At first, I said, oh, well, I'm the CEO. I have to do everything, right? And of course, I was more even hyper focused on that because I was just terminated. And now I had a lawsuit going for the wrongful termination. But I knew that was going to take years. So I had to focus on 221B. As I was building 221B and learning to be a CEO, I was learning as time went on that it wasn't, I'm the CEO, I have to do everything. It transitioned from, I'm the CEO, I have to find the people who know how to do the things that need to be done, and then I have to manage them. And that took a few years because in the beginning, you have this sense that you have to do it all. No one can do it better than you. Everyone else is going to screw it up. Right. And, you just have these concerns. So I had to shift and transition from that. In the midst of that, I also saw that there was a lot of ebbs and flows in the business. There were months where we were killing it, and then there were some months that were slower and months that we'd go. So I realized I had to create some sort of passive income or secondary income stream outside of this business. The business is 3-4 years old at the time. So that's when I was said, okay, I had gotten into, like, in the time I'd gotten into the life insurance, I'd bought a couple of rental properties and I was fixing them up and doing stuff like that. And I did pretty well. That's when everything changed for me because I went from being able to now get into bigger deals because I had more money to do it. We started buying apartment complexes and apartment buildings and then college dorms. And the more money you have, the more access you have to some of these opportunities and the different rooms you can get in and different people you network with. So the commercial real estate thing came as a way to offset the ebbs and flows of the business.
Plus the income.
Yeah, so it was great. But then the business started to really skyrocket and the ebbs and flows started to dissipate and it just started to turn into just that trajectory up. And I had I have the commercial real estate portfolio set up now. We still buy properties and we still do deals, but 221B now is, the primary focus, and it changes when you start.
When you're still actively involved in 22B1.
Yeah.
You haven't sold it.
No.
Did you ever sell it?
We had a couple of offers recently. Actually, we had a couple of offers. A couple of them were nice offers.
Holy shit.
Yeah, it's so the day someone reaches out to you and makes an offer for the thing you started in your garage with a sewing machine and a roll of duct tape. And
it's like a Google story or like a Amazon story, so it's pretty cool. Everything always starts in a garage.
Yeah, and you're like, holy crap, I can't believe someone's willing to pay this much money for this thing I started. But, we built it. Now we're 10 years in.
It's still just you and one partner?
Me and one partner.
Wow.
And, we're in almost 300 retail locations around the world, over 80 countries. We service police departments and agencies in all 50 states.
You have to get, what's it called, patents and things like that.
Yeah.
You still see a ton of rip-offs and things like that?
We've had a couple of rip-offs come in and fade away because it's hard to rip off that product. But getting knocked off was one of the best things that ever happened to us because it made us step up our game and it made us realize what other people are going to try to do. So one of our best features today came from one of the knockoffs that they disappeared. But when they knocked us off, they tried to change something. And we saw that change. They screwed it up, but we said we can make that change better.
That's actually pretty interesting.
And it helped us make millions of dollars. So I tell people in business world, don't ever be afraid if someone knocks you off. That's fine. We send a letter from the attorneys about the patent infringement and stuff like that. But the reality is getting knocked off, one, it's a compliment, but two, it's helped us grow the business exponentially. Mm-hmm. And now we have a whole line of products. We have apparel, we have safety gloves, we have things, we have military contracts where we service the military. So it's come full circle. We've been able to make some gear for some of these high-level units that I wanted to join at one point.
Wow.
So I've gotten to train with some of these guys throughout the years and going and training, doing, drills on a range and in shoot houses with guys who are like Navy SEAL Team 6 guys is like crazy. But I've always been into it. So now full circle, I get to now train with them sometimes and make gear, for their units that they need because we make custom stuff that we don't put out to the public. So it's a crazy circle of life where, where I started, what I wanted to do, where I had to go and diverted. And But everything happens for a reason.
Right.
And
your story is definitely proof of that.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of us have moments where it's like you were fired or you were let go or in your case, wrongfully terminated, but it was meant because you were just being redirected at that point into something that you were almost actually forced into it, which is really, really cool. A question that I had for you was, I lost the question. Oh, well, let me ask you this question: do you still carry that same chip on your shoulder that has kind of forged your path to where you're at today?
Yeah, I don't know if it could ever leave, because once you grow up in a certain way where everyone is looking at you a certain way, like, because it still happens, right? There are times where, despite what I have and my net worth and the company and whatever, the way I look now is what I wear most of the time. I wear shorts, sandals, and a t-shirt. And I feel like, okay, I'm able to not have to wear like a button down everywhere I go and things like that. So this is how I look, and no one has no idea. I mean, you might see the car I pull up in, but if you don't see the car I pull up in, you have no idea who I am. But you could still have a nice car and be broke too as well. And I'll walk into places, and every so often I feel it. I feel how they're treating me differently and looking at me differently. And I know it's because of the color of my skin. And I go back in my mind, I'm like, oh man. Like, I knew if I walked in here with some proper khakis and a white button down and maybe like a proper watch on, like, maybe they wouldn't be looking at me like this. But I have to break that. Because I can't live my life like that, right? So the only thing I can do in that moment is present myself as the person I am and change that. I have to shift their behavior. I have to alter their mindset. So someone's looking at me like I'm walking into some store, and they're looking at me like, oh, this black guy's going to come in here and rob the place or something. And I'm friendly, I'm cordial, I'm kind, and I walk out, and maybe I shifted their mentality that little bit. They're like, oh, wow, that guy was really nice.
Or you could be like the guy that you walk into like a fancy car dealership and nobody comes to help you. And
it's happened to me. Yeah.
And then you pull out like a bag of cash. You're like, yeah, I'll take that one right there. Like the salesman that was like actually nice to you.
Happened to me. Now, what month is it? Happened to me just under 2 months ago. That exact thing happened to me. Yeah. I literally walked into a place ready to buy a $200,000 car. Literally ready. And I was on the phone with my buddy. And I'm like, oh, no one's coming to help me. He's like, bro, just walk out. I just dropped him off at the airport too. The same buddy. He's like, he lives in LA. I was on the phone with him, and he's like, bro, just walk out. And I was there. They had the car I wanted. And I just needed someone to come up to me, because I already done all my buyer does all the research. He's like, yeah, it's here. It has all the feet. You just got to go there. I literally just needed someone to come up and say, I want to buy that car right there. No haggling, no financing. That's the car I want. I just want to buy the car. No one came up to me. I was literally walking around there like no one came up. No one asked for a bottle of water. No one, and I saw a few people look at me. No one.
Oh, that's the worst.
And no one. They kind of looked at me and whatever, and they kind of kept being busy. One guy looked at me. He was at his desk. He looked at me and just went right back on his phone. I was like, oh. I drove 30 minutes down the road to another dealership that had another car I was looking at that was actually a little bit more money, but had some, design elements that I didn't, I just drove the 40 minutes, walked in, guy walked right up. Hey, how are you, sir? Can I help you? I said, yeah. I said,
today's your lucky day.
I said, you feel like selling a car? He's like, he was a young guy. He's like, yeah, sure. I said, that one over there. I'd like that car right there. And he said, do you want to test drive it? I said, nope. I don't think you'd have some piece of shit on your showroom floor. It was in the showroom.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah. What are we doing here? I said, that's it. I'm buying that car. And like maybe, an hour later, I drove away with that car.
Which is crazy though nowadays, because you literally can't underestimate anybody. It could be some young kid dressed, and you're like, and he could be the most famous YouTuber that you just don't even know, or TikToker. And if you underestimate anybody, it's just like, it's just it's. I feel like it's stupid in today's day and age to do that, especially if you're in sales. Like
Yeah, yeah, you never know who you're dealing with.
Right.
Like, I was at the dealership for service the other day at McLaren, and these kids came in. They looked like they just got out of bed. They had their, baseball caps sideways and all this, like, this group, like little. They were white kids. They looked like they were 14, but clearly they weren't. And they look like just derelicts. I'm like, oh my God, these guys look like they literally just rolled out of bed in their sweatpants and whatever. And they came up, and I watched them, and they got into a McLaren, like a 720, and two of them left, and the other one's got into some like G-Wagon, and they pulled out. I was like, what was that? And in my mind, I'm thinking, it has to be like YouTubers or something like that.
Yeah.
And the sales manager came out, and I said, who's that guy that just got into that orange McLaren? He's like, he's some YouTuber or something like that. And I was like, that's it. And he said, he came in and bought that car cash.
Yep.
And I was like, good for him.
Yeah.
Good for him.
The last thing I want to ask you, that's what it came back to me, is you were filming some movie last week. Talk about that real quick.
Oh, yeah. So,
you getting into acting?
So this is a crazy story, as is my life. So my buddy who lived out here, his name was John Bartolo. He was my best friend. He had a huge podcast out here. Through his podcast, he had become, ironically, we're talking about this, he'd become friendly with these guys who are big YouTubers called the Geeks and Gamers. And they have a gaming channel. They review all kinds of stuff, but they're awesome dudes. And they have a massive, massive following on YouTube. He had brought them on his show, had interviewed them on the podcast, and then he called me and he said, hey, I got these guys. They're called Geeks and Gamers. They're on YouTube. I'm like, I'm not a geek, I don't think, and I don't game. So I haven't had a gaming system since Atari. And he's like, no, they're doing some cool stuff. Like, you got to connect with them. I said, I own a tactical gear company. I don't know. He's like, maybe help them with their merch or something, whatever. So I never connected with them. He passed away unexpectedly a couple years ago. And after his services, I connected with these guys at Geeks and Gamers. Two guys, especially Jeremy, Ryan, and the third guy, Jay. And I started doing some merch for them, and they don't know anything about merch. They're not merch guys. They're YouTubers. They live stream and stuff like that. So I said, let me handle that world for you. So we did that. These other guys that have this movie production studio, who's friends with those guys, they're like, hey, we're about to do this movie. We need some, like, the main character is going to be this action, sci-fi, whatever. We need, like, some tactical gear, whatever, for this character. And they were like, oh, you got to call Suresh, 221B Tactical. He has all that gear. Body armor, plate carriers, like badass looking gloves, whatever. So they call me and we have a conversation about the gear. And they subsequently saw me and like on the website and some photo and whatever. And they're like, you might like, and then they heard from these guys. They're like, oh, this guy like trains with like SEAL Team 6 guys and like, some Army Rangers and like some crazy dudes. He's like legit. And he was a cop for 13 years and he trains with all these crazy people who do crazy shit. So they're like, how about, would you ever want to be the lead in our movie? He's like a soldier, sci-fi soldier, whatever, super soldier kind of guy. And I'm like, me? I haven't acted since like the high school play. I said I did some modeling, so I told him about the modeling. I said, but you don't need to act. You just got to like wear clothes. And they're like, it's fine. You'll be good. You just have the look we want, and you have the gear. So awesome. I was like, all right, and that's it. And next thing I know, I was on set, and I didn't even take it seriously. I thought it was going to be like some little cheesy, kind of like
YouTube skit.
Like, yeah, exactly. It was
fucking movie.
It was a movie, bro. It was a movie. I went there. They had the lighting. They had the sound guys. They had makeup guy who was just like on some like did like Kill Bill. They had stunt coordinators, and I was like,
you're like, I should have prepared.
I'm like, oh, I should have read this script a little harder. So that night I went back to the hotel. Like the first day I met everyone. I was on set. I was looking at it. I was like, I went back to the hotel that night. I'm like going through the script. I'm like, oh my God, I got to remember all these lines. But it was a movie, full blown, bro. It was real. Great experience. And it just fell into it, and I have a newfound respect for actors. 100%, because it was cold. There were long days. You're hungry. You're in like weird positions on the ground, freezing, covered in blood. And, you got to do the scene like 19 times. And, it's so, yeah, you're not like in the heat digging a ditch on the side of the road, but it's hard in a different way, But yeah, crazy experience. And then from that now, people have reached out to me, and more opportunities are coming for other movies, and now hosting TV shows and all these things. All these people are reaching out of the blue, and I'm like, I'm a CEO. I'm running a full company full time.
Yeah.
Like this is. But then, how do you say no to that? Because
Yeah.
that might be something.
It'll open up way more doors.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you do got the look, man. You're built like an action figure. That's cool, man. All right, so we'll just we'll get to my last question, but before I do, how can my audience find you? How can they connect with you? And I know that you have a coaching program that you're that's already launched.
Yeah, it's already launched.
Ready to go. So how can people connect with you?
I'll be honest, I don't run my social media anymore. I have people doing it. I couldn't handle it. I wanted to. It's not for not wanting to.
You're good.
But if you message on Instagram, Suresh_actual, and it's directed to me, it'll come to me. Facebook, same thing. YouTube, Tactical Ambitions is the name of the mentorship program, because my mentor, which we didn't even get into, but shortly after the life insurance business and before 221B, I'd met this mentor. He ultimately became a billionaire, and he gave me a lot of guidance, which helped me along the way. But that was over the last 20 years. So I have a lot of lessons I learned that were, critical lessons from him on his way to becoming a billionaire that I've now compressed down into little nuggets. So a lot of people over the years have said, bro, you got to share that. Like, why wouldn't you most people said, write a book. And I was like, not about writing a book, but he wasn't a coach. He was a mentor and accountability. That's what he did. And most of the stuff I did, I knew what to do, but now he was telling me, you know what to do it, and do it by this time and do it by this date. So he's holding me accountable. Mm-hmm. So most people don't need a coach. They need an accountability partner and maybe a little bit of mentoring. So that's what the program is, which is Tactical Ambitions. So if you go to sureshmadhavan.com, you'll see a link to that. And if you go to tacticalambitions.com, you learn all about that. But then, Instagram, TikTok, Tactical Ambitions. And, the content there is, to really push you and motivate you and become the best version of yourself. I think we're seeing a lot of weakness, especially in men in our country at this time. And I think that's why our country is in this turmoil. And the message is, never a victim, always pushing forward, never stuck on that wheel of consumption, but getting onto the wheel of production, right? Because you can,
like what I said this morning,
you could sit here and read books and go to seminars and, watch YouTube videos and listen to 3-hour podcasts until you're blue in the face. But that's consumption. And at some point you have to shift into actual action and direction and utility. And if you never leave that consumption phase and never move to production, you're just never going to get anywhere. So that's part of the program of the mentorship and the guidance that I'm offering, is to get you off that one wheel and get you on, which you probably see in the insurance business. Yeah. There's a lot of people I saw in the insurance business come in. They had what it took, but they were just stuck on this wheel. And then you would see other people, they were just churning and burning, closing clients, writing policies right and left. And people were looking at them like, wow, how did this guy doing that? Because he learned enough, and he said, okay, now I know enough. Now I'm just going to go. And he would build clients in the pipeline, and he would just close and close and close. And then the best question I learned from my mentor in the insurance business was when I would always try to level up. He said, always level up. And I started out with cops and teachers, but he said, always ask, who do you want to be like? And every couple I sat with, they had a couple that was richer than them, that they were like, oh, God, yeah, I'd be like Nick and Jennifer. Who's Nick and Jennifer? Oh, he has his own company. He does really well. She does well. They live over here. Really, I would love to meet with them. And then I meet Nick and Jennifer, and I say, so who do you guys like to be like? And they're like, oh, well, our friend so-and-so. They're like, and then that's how I always leveled up. And just that little bit, that was the difference that made the difference. And so getting people into that mindset really to level up in their life, no matter what they're doing.
Right. I think you nailed it with the accountability part. Most people know what they need to do. They just need that accountability. So I think it's so right. I've paid for plenty of masterminds, coachings. That paying to get into those rooms sometimes is what you need to do to get to that next level.
Yeah.
So my last question for you, brother, is A1 stands for the highest of qualities and standards. And so I just want to ask the last question. What are 3 standards you live your life by?
Health first. Doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter what kind of car you drive. It doesn't matter what kind of house you live in. If you don't take care of your health, nothing else matters. And I have seen through my networks and through my relationships, a guy worth $300 million laying in a hospital bed in the ICU dying, looking up saying, don't let me die, I can't die. But he has made a series of poor decisions with his health over the last 5, 10, 15 years, thinking his money was going to keep him invincible. But when you're laying in the ICU, listen, when you roll through the doors of the ER, they don't look at you and say, well, he's worth $300 million and he's worth $300, so we're going to take super good care of the guy who's worth $300 million. It doesn't happen. Everyone gets the same care. So the name of the game is stay out of the hospital, right? So it doesn't matter how much you're worth, you got to take care of your health. So health, first and foremost. Second is faith. I don't care what God you believe in, or if you believe in universe and source and energy and whatever. Have faith in something that is bigger than yourself, that you believe is some sort of guiding light in your world. Because even if you say, I believe in the sun is the most powerful thing in the world, and that's my guiding, but fine, and every day I got to wake up and look at the sun, and I got to watch the sun rise, and I got to watch the sun set, and that's my guiding, and that gives me peace and my gratitude and all that. Fine. Hey, great. Let that be, but you have to have some kind of principle to guide you as far as what you have faith in. Lastly, you have to have the mindset and the gratitude for already having. I tell people that all the time. In business, have the mindset and feel the energy of how good it feels to have closed 100 policies this month and sold 40 cars this month, sold X amount in product this month. How would it feel for you to see that number in your Shopify account, your bank account, whatever, at the end of the month? Like, what would that energy feel like? How good would it feel if you saw that number? That energy, you have to have it, and you have to live it and feel it every single day as if it's already your world and in your world. And then that is what that's what I believe brings more, having that gratitude and having that thankfulness that it's already there. Not the wanting for it, but that it already happened. And it's hard. It's hard, like, especially when you're broke. It's hard to sit there and walk around like, I'm not broke, I'm a millionaire. And it's kind of hard. Like, it's like, what is this, pretend world? But yeah, actually, what would the mood be if you woke up tomorrow and you were a millionaire? How would you feel? How would you walk? You'd probably walk a little taller. You'd walk into the Terrible's gas station a little bit differently if you knew you were worth 10 million rather than I only have $10. So don't walk in like you have $10. Walk in like you have 10 million. And hold yourself in that energy and that mood and that mindset, because before it happens in your world and you could hold it in your hand, it has to happen in your mind. Mm-hmm. So those 3 have to be in your world. And then I think after that, everything else will pretty much fall in place.
Yeah. That last one, man, is probably one of the favorite, probably the best ones I've ever heard, man. So thanks for sharing that. Suresh, thank you, brother. Appreciate you, man.
That's awesome, man.
Awesome
Thank you so much for having me, man.
Yeah, of course. If you guys got some value out of this, like, comment, subscribe, the whole 9. Thank you guys for watching. Peace.